afterwards. But hello everyone who is here. My name is Claire. I'm one of the campaign managers from Virtual, and I'm here helping the prep team with their campaign. It is my great pleasure today to introduce the CEO, Andrew Perry, to our webinar today, and the one of Prep's advisors, Professor Graham P. Young, with so many letters after his name, it's like the alphabet.
You can leave them out.
I will leave them out because otherwise I'll get very muddled. But just as a quick recap on our two speakers today, Andrew here has over 20 years of business experience ranging across a number of different sectors, including franchising, health and fitness, finance and home services. Andrew is a director and shareholder of franchise group EFM Health Clubs, which has over 7,000 members nationally and 60 franchise units specialising in group personal training. And Professor Graham is the Distinguished Professor at Matthew Flinders University in Cancer Research, Flinders Health and Medical Research Institute, College of Medicine and Public Health. Have I got everything there from both of you? Have covered both of your credentials?
Fine.
Beautiful. I've just got Andrew on mute still.
How's that, Claire?
Beautiful. Excellent. Okay, well, I thought, again, for today's webinar, just to give you a brief overview of how we will run it, I will quickly show the prepped hydration expression of interest video for those who haven't seen it, and then I'll pass it on to both Graham and Andrew to canter through the pitch deck they have ready today to tell you a little bit more about the company, and then that should take about 20 minutes, and hopefully after that we'll have about 40 minutes for Q&A. So if you have a question throughout the presentation, please just use the Q&A button down the bottom and submit your question, and I will take questions at the end and present them to our panelists. So without further ado, I will share the video for Prepped and then we'll get cracking.
It's 22 hours a week.
Hi, my name's Andrew Perry. I'm the CEO of Prepped Hydration. I'm here today to talk to you about our wonderful products and also the capital raise we're about to undertake. I joined Prepped after using the product running the New York Marathon in 2017. And whilst the benefit of running the marathon was awesome, a few days later when I was in LA on my way home, I had the ability to, after the marathon, I recovered well enough that I could go for another 15K run, and never ever been able to do that after a marathon before.
The first time I trialled Prepped, I was honestly genuinely amazed. I was in a massive training block of 18 to 22 hours a week, and I was really struggling to back up the sessions and the intensity required throughout those without Prepped.
The Prep products are a real game changer. Not since 1965 has there been such a significant advancement in the sports nutrition category. Prepped is backed by over 20 years of scientific research between Flinders and Yale Universities.
So the beauty of this is you can have the prime drink 6 to 18 hours before your main event or your big hard training session, and it will drastically increase your body's ability to absorb fluid. And then there's also the Recover formula, which you drink pretty much straight after you've finished that training session or the event, and it will also help enhance your hydration in the hours following the event, and of course that'll lead to much better recovery.
We're going global. We've got the product, we've got the ambassadors, we've got world champions that use the product. This is where you come in. Your investment will allow us to take this to the world. Our global expansion has already begun. We've started with Singapore, we're looking to get into Hong Kong and build strategic distribution partnerships in the US and Europe in early 2022. Your investment will help us increase our marketing, expand our ambassador following, and allow us to continue to get the Prep brand around the world. The sports sector is just one market. There's a host of other markets that we can tap into. We've already done some trials with the Australian Defence Force. We've had engagement with mining companies, and with your investment, we can continue to grow these areas of the business. We've developed the brand and we've got a great community. We want you to join us as we take this great Australian product global.
And there we are. I think probably one of the best videos we've seen coming through virtual for a company looking to raise capital. But without any further ado, I will switch over the meeting host to Andrew. He'll take you through the slide deck and tell you all about it.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks everyone for coming along today and giving some time to hear about our pitch and our investment capital raise that we've got going on with Birchall at the moment. It has certainly got off to a great start. We've had over 230 expressions of interest so far. And the real pleasing part about that, and I'm not sure who's online at the moment, but the real pleasing part about it is over 50% of those people that have expressed an interest are passionate customers that are using the product daily or weekly or monthly or at events. And we constantly hear about these amazing stories of people that have had an extraordinary experience with PrEP and how it's transformed their ability to perform at their peak for longer, or set a PB, or run their fastest marathon, whatever it may be, not suffer from cramping and those sorts of things. So we'll let Graham get into the science behind that in a moment. But I guess the problem that we're fixing with our products is we know that a 2% drop in body weight during exercise is common for most athletes. So for an average athlete that may be about 80 kilos, that's about a 1.6 kilogram loss or loss of fluid, and that can affect their athletic performance by up to 30%. So that's significant, and we constantly hear from the athletes that are using our product that they certainly don't experience that fluid loss, and they certainly have the ability to push on for longer in an exercise program, depending on what they're doing. There's a number of limiting factors in the current sports hydration drinks that are on the market at the moment, and we don't see ourselves competing head on with those drinks. We certainly see ourselves opening up a new market, which is a subhydrate, or the subcategory being the pre-hydration market, which allows us to ask people to consume a product before they actually exercise. I'll let Graham go into the science of that in a lot more detail, given that he's been around for a long time and has spent many years researching, I guess, the dehydration and how it affects the human body. So without any further ado, Graham, I'll hand over to you, but understanding that since this sports hydration market started back in about 1965, as I said in the pitch video, this is one of the biggest, or arguably the biggest leap forward in new hydration products for athletes. Graham, over to you.
Thanks very much, Andrew, and good morning, afternoon or evening, depending on where you're joining us from. So let me get straight to the business of what's on the slides and what underpins the whole idea here. It's already been mentioned that there are two components to the product, the Prime and the Recover product. The Prime product, as it's been explained, is to be taken a period before the exercise, ideally about 6 to 12 hours beforehand. And what this does is it ensures that the resistant starch that is in the product, I'll say a little more about that later, actually gets down into the colon or the large bowel, so that when you're actually then undertaking the exercise and you're drinking, that water which you're drinking will transit right through the bowel really quite quickly, but the starch will already be there and being fermented by the bacteria, which is crucial to the effect. So that's the reason for the Prime product. The second product, which has already also been explained, the Recover product, is really optimally organised to rehydrate you very quickly at that particular point in time. So what it does is it contains some more resistant starch, but it also contains the right balance of electrolytes and so on that are designed to replenish the sort of losses of electrolytes that occur during sweating and exercise. And it has a small amount of glucose to also enhance the fluid uptake. I think the important thing to point out, as the third point on that slide says, is that the Prep is low in sugar. And this is really important for hydration. We've known in the medical field for 30 years that if the sugar is too concentrated, it actually slows the fluid absorption. And almost all of the so-called hydration drinks for sports, they're really energy drinks, and you do need the energy. But in fact, those sugar concentrations slow the fluid uptake. So it needs to be low in sugar. But it also contains, well, it says dietary fibre on the slide, and resistant starch is a dietary fibre, but it's not one that feels or tastes like a dietary fibre. Importantly, it's a prebiotic. That means it's a dietary substance which actually promotes good gut health and immune health. And it's that action that is crucial to what happens here in both the sports and the medical arenas. If I could have the next slide, thanks, Andrew. Yeah. So it's not actually a replacement for sports drinks, but actually is designed to make any water that you drink work more effectively in terms of hydration. And it is a completely new product in that sense. Now, as already been said, we've had over 20 years of groundbreaking medical research, and I'd just like to take you briefly through a couple of the points about this. Right back in the 1980s, I commenced research on how diet prevented getting bowel cancer, and what we found at that time was that certain types of dietary fibre changed the conditions inside the bowel and resulted in generation of chemicals that we call short-chain fatty acids that help protect you against bowel cancer. The important thing we found at the time was that the most efficient way, and the way that was most tolerated by people, was to actually provide resistant starch as that source of prebiotic for the bacteria. And that was a resistant starch that came from an Australian agricultural product, which is derived from maize. That is actually the product that we're currently using in the formulation. And because of that work, I was asked to speak internationally at a conference in France in 1993 to present that work at that stage. At the same conference, a colleague from Yale University, who is a world expert in fluid transport in the intestine and in treating diarrhea, and another colleague from India who's now at SIMS University in Chennai, one of the top 5 medical schools in India, they talked about the problem that diarrhea created on the world scene in terms of at that stage, the 2 million children per year who died from dehydration from diarrhea. And they pointed out that the oral rehydration solutions for diarrhea, while effective, were far from ideal, and mothers didn't quite like them because they didn't reduce the diarrhea. They corrected dehydration, but they didn't reduce the diarrhea. And they wondered if they could tap into the potential of the colon to absorb fluid. And in a child, it's 1 to 2 litres a day, and in an adult, it's 5 litres. If they could tap into that colonic absorptive capacity, they'd have a new way to do it. But they didn't know how to get the generation of the short-chain fatty acid chemical butyrate in the colon. Of course, we knew because we'd been researching it in cancer. So the 3 of us got together immediately at the end of the session in the conference and said, we've got a great new idea here. This can influence world health. And so we then went ahead, we got funding from Burroughs Wellcome Foundation, we got collaborations with WHO, we got funding for Bill Gates. And what we did over really the subsequent 20 years is to do quite a lot of scientific work in animal models and human studies and 4 clinical trials, which included adults with severe cholera, where you lose 10 to 20 litres of fluid a day, and that kills you if it's not corrected, and children with rotavirus diarrhea, to show that this resistant starch formulation that tapped into the absorptive capacity of the colon really did work. So that's the medical side of it, and really the basis of this. Now, Why is it that resistant starch is really effective in this context? Well, we've already said it. It is fermented by the bacteria. It's a prebiotic. It generates this short chain fatty acid. And what that does is that enhances the absorptive capacity of the colon to bring in up to 5 litres a day. And it does it because that gets fermented in the colon and generates that naturally occurring chemical. What about the resistant starch itself? Well, this is a very safe food. As we'll mention, well, it's mentioned on this slide, it's HASTA certified. Well, that's the sports requirement in terms of drug taking and so on, but it's also classified, the Americans use the term GRAS status, which stands for generally regarded as safe. In other words, it's a food source that can be very readily and safely used in many different foods. So we're talking really here about an agricultural product that is very safe and which the body itself, or the bacteria in the body, create a naturally occurring chemical that has this digestive work. The other thing behind all of this is that we've also done a lot of work on the formulation. We've had to work out how to make sure that the starch is well distributed. We've had to do the work that means that as we create the sports formulation, that this feels good in the mouth, it's tolerated, people like it. And of course, the sports formulation has got to be a bit different from the medical one, because you're not dealing with the sort of losses you see in diarrhea, you're dealing with the sort of losses that you get with sweating and hydration. So we've had to adapt and adjust the electrolyte composition and so on. That's the background to the formulation. So we know a lot about it from the science perspective. We have the medical proof. And of course, we have the effect that the research in the sports environment itself, which we're going to come to, I think, in a moment or two, Andrew, that really backs up the idea as we've transferred what's been a medical idea and a physiological idea into the special physiological disturbances that occur in relatively extreme sports situations. Thank you.
Graham, thanks for that. I mean, I just feel we're really lucky to be able to have had that amount of background research and medical collaboration between, 2 or 3 of the greatest universities around the world to come up with that, and we've been able to license that IP and use it in what we now know and consumers now know as prepped hydration. It's certainly groundbreaking and does, when we look at a market global opportunity, it certainly sits us out in a space all by ourselves. And I guess from our perspective, if we look at the global market opportunity, we understand that it's about $228 billion a year is this sports hydration nutrition space that we sit in. We can see the major players in that space across well-known brands. Where the product and service segment is where we sit, we certainly sit in that fruit juice and cocktail category that is growing. We certainly know and understand that the carbonated soft drink, the energy drinks, that sort of market is shrinking as more and more people look for a healthier option of a sports drink, and that's certainly we sit in that space. We know that is where our market sits, and we look at the Australian market and the opportunity there. It is much smaller than the world scale, but what we do know from Australia is there is about 3.5 million Australian people that exercise about 3 hours a week. So we look at that from our perspective, and I guess if we could have 1% of that 3.5 million people using PrEP once or twice a week, that's a significant market size for us. So that's about 35,000 people a week using PrEP. For us, the opportunity in terms of who we are and what we do, if we were looking at, we've got sachets that are about to come onto the market, which we've got here. They'll retail for about $4.50 online, and also in 110 retail stores we've got around the country. So if we've got people using one of those a week, it's certainly a very viable market for us. But I guess if we map those numbers across, we've spoken about in the pitch video about Singapore. There's about the population in Singapore is about 6 million. So that if we use the same numbers where we arrive in Australia with about 3.5 million people as an active market for us, there's about, just under 850,000 in Singapore. The active market in the greater of Tokyo, because we're talking to people in Japan at the moment, is about 5.3 million people. California, we sit at about 5.6, and then in Hong Kong, there's about 1 million active people that we could certainly tap into. And if we just have, as I said before, 1% of that market, it certainly gives us a good foothold and allows us to expand quite quickly. In terms of our products, so we have RTDs and also the tubs. Some of the people may have seen the tubs, but we've got, here it is, it will come in, tub there. And our profit margins on these are very good. From a wholesale point of view, when we sell into our customer base or our retailers around the country, we generally sit around that 54 to 57% profit margin on those. From an online perspective, we're more around the 75 to 80% profit margin for the sachets. And then for the tubs online, we jump up a little bit and get up around the 83% in terms of markets, or in terms of margins for those. So certainly we understand that they're good margins, but we can make those margins better. At the moment, when we're manufacturing in smaller runs, just to conserve cash, so we can still market and advertise the business with the money that we've previously raised from investment, and don't want to have too much of that cash sitting on shelves. But what we can do with this capital raise is we can certainly start to manufacture our runs in a bigger run size and get more economies of scale there, which will be advantageous for us as we move through that. I think the other things that we want to think about is how we use the products how we tap into the markets as we move through, and we'll touch on that a little bit later on as we go through. So what we want to do is building strategic manufacturing and distribution partnerships, as we said in the pitch video, into the US later in this year and in early 2022 into Europe. But we'll also start, I guess with COVID, it's allowed us to tap into the Southeast Asian market a little bit differently and open up, I guess, a market there that we hadn't really explored. And the Singapore option came up early, and we've now been speaking to Hong Kong and people in Japan as well. So what that allows us to do is certainly increase our market and extend the way we get our product to market in a different way. With COVID, we'll certainly be looking at markets that aren't as affected. So I understand, doing some research at the moment, that Colorado is one of the states in America that is nowhere near as hit as hard as the eastern coast or the western coast. So, we'll certainly be targeting our approach into those markets. In terms of increasing our marketing and spend progressively in terms of sales, we've recently launched a relationship with a group here in Australia called Fitness Vending. Whilst they provide, or they've got fitness vending machines in 3,500 fitness facilities around the country, and look, at the moment in Victoria, some of those are under a little bit of pressure. But as we move through the next six odd months, we think that will be a really, really good place for us to get our sachets into the gym market and grow our market from there. Fitness Vending also provide product to Chemist Warehouse and other distributors. So we'll certainly be able to tap into that from that relationship as well. And then finally, in terms of broadening our market and penetration to get into, I guess, some more health conscious segments, we'll be able to expand and one of the things we're really passionate about and certainly been lucky to have on board so far is our brand ambassadors, and we'll touch on those a little bit later as well. But we'll certainly be able to broaden our brand ambassadors with a targeted approach to female brand ambassadors. We've got great male brand ambassadors on the moment, but we certainly want to extend out the female side of our ambassador portfolio. Graham, did you want to just talk through the clinical trial that we did with the Adelaide Crows and how that came about?
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. So, look, being a doctor, a medical researcher, and a scientist, getting evidence in the context of usage is really a very important issue for me. We need to understand the science behind it, which we do, but we also need to see what happens in real practice, and not artificial practice, but real practice. It's interesting that this, the heading for this slide is the clinical trial, but when we designed this study with the Adelaide Crows Aussie Rules Football Club, we put in the protocol for the study to the Research Ethics Committee of Flinders University and Flinders Medical Centre, and met all the requirements of clinical trials to make sure that all the bases of safety and ethics and everything were absolutely covered. So in a sense, it really was a clinical trial, and it was a clinical trial that was of a randomised single crossover design for people who are interested in that sort of thing. 31 of the Adelaide Crows players actually participated, and each of them in four elements. So there were 4 days, 2 days in the control period and 2 days in the test period, where we actually compared their standard sort of protocol, and it was their own individual chosen protocol rather than being highly specified by us, but then with the prepped products added in the test periods. And I might say that when we did it, it was in the end of January in Adelaide. I was there with my team in the rooms and out on the field as they did all of this stuff, and the temperatures reached 38, 39, 40 degrees on every single day that we actually did this work. So, and of course, the players were in very intensive training prior to the workup, and it was a real world setting. We couldn't control everything that they drank. We couldn't control everything that they did, but we used GPS trackers to make sure they were adequately exerting themselves and all that sort of thing to do the study. And in fact, to really cut to the point, we monitored their body hydration status by doing very careful weighing of them at set times, by looking at what we call the hematocrit, which is their blood concentration, which is the most direct measure of hydration that we're able to actually use. And what we effectively showed in that trial, judged on the tough sort of medical criteria that you'd use, you know, if you were studying a drug, was that we improved hydration by around about a kilogram, which is effectively roughly a litre of fluid. Now, of course, this sort of study is not what we call very tightly controlled. It can't be. It's a real world study, but it's important to show in the real world that we really can improve hydration. And that's, in fact, exactly what we achieved. And you'll see a statement from Anthony Mead, who's an accredited sports dietitian in Adelaide, and we've worked with him, and he was involved with the Crows at the time, where you know, he attests to the fact that from his perspective, not just my perspective looking at it from the clinical and scientific perspective, but from his perspective as a scientist, the benefit that we saw was showing the proof of principle that this hydration strategy actually works. Thanks, Andrew.
I guess we are founded on great science, and so we continue to look at other ways that we can continue to improve our product or prove the product works in a much more controlled environment. Graham, you were a part of having a chat with the Australian Defence Force about some trial that we did there with the ADF. So do you want to give a little bit of background about that? And then I'll talk to the SASI and Australian Institute of Sport trials that we've got going.
Sure. So the issue that the Australian Defence Force was interested was quite intriguing for me. I go back a long way and actually had to do my national service as a young doctor in Papua New Guinea for over a year. And at the time I was the medical battalion medical officer in one of the battalions where the SAS soldiers who were either on their way to the Vietnam War or on their way back were doing all these exercises. So I saw firsthand what happened with the Defence Force out in the hot, steamy jungle environment and the effect that hydration and dehydration actually had on them. So when the Australian government said they were really interested in looking at the product, not not for treating soldiers for diarrhea, but for keeping them hydrated. I thought I understood and knew the environment. So, in fact, we partnered with an excellent team of nutrition dietitians and people experienced in clinical studies in the Defence Force. And earlier, about probably 6-8 months ago, in Queensland, they actually did some substantial field work with soldiers in the field. Because of the pandemic and the diversion of interests of the Defence Force, we still haven't been able to finally get down to the tin tacks of the detail, but they were very pleased with how things went in that initial investigation. Andrew, should I talk about Png Ventures as well, just briefly?
Yes, go for it.
Yeah, so Procter & Gamble Ventures approached us because they were interested in what we had and whether it might be complementary for what they were interested in. Their interest is purely in protein supplementation for sports people. And they're just wondering if there would be a complementarity between our product and theirs in a way that there could be a partnership going forward. So it's not about a reformulation of our product at all. We probably wouldn't want that to happen, but it's really about packaging products together. Now, they're still in the process. We've had several very intensive conversations with them. They're doing some market research, and we're really waiting for them to get back to us at this point in time.
Thanks, Graham. The Australian Institute of Sport, again, similar to the Australian Defence Force, they, through each of the state Institute of Sports had reached out to us to undertake what they were calling a hyperhydration trial for the Australian Olympic team or certain teams that were going to the Olympics. We're thinking about, teams that play round robin, so hockey, soccer, your basketball teams, those sorts of teams that were participating, your marathon runners as well, the triathlon, anyone that was backing up for a number of sporting efforts over a number of days. They were certainly doing what was called a hyperhydration trial. And the idea of this hyperhydration trial was to allow the Australian athlete to arrive at the start line in their most advanced hydrated space, which would give them the best possible chance of being the best hydrated throughout the course of their event. That hydration trial did start, but through the COVID period has been put on hold and then subsequently on hold because the Olympics have been pushed back for effectively 12 months. But we are looking forward to having that finish off. And that trial started because we've done a lot of work with the SASI team here in South Australia, which has been very promising. And out of some of the research that we've done there, that's led to UniSA wanting to have a chat to us. And Graham, you spoke a little bit earlier about the real life example with the Adelaide Crows, and that being, I guess, the experience we had there. But the protocols for the UniSA research that is going on is going to be much more tightly held in terms of being able to, I guess, prove the outcomes of our product. So the UniSA trial is going to be on a bike. It will be, enabling someone to exercise at a certain level, and then there'll be a hard effort at the back end, and we'll be able to see the level of how hydration assists those people in that trial. Yeah, sorry, Andrew.
Sorry,
you're right.
I hadn't clicked the button. Just want to back you up. The UniSA study is going to be able to look much more objectively at the physiological parameters because things will be much more tightly controlled. So it's complementary to the sort of thing that we did with the Crows and will give us a further strength that backs up the ideas that underpin this product.
Thanks, Graham. Clicking over, a handful of our brand ambassadors that we have at the moment, and throughout the video we heard from Amber Pape, we heard from Tim Reed, we saw some in-car footage from Todd Hazelwood in the supercar space where the ambient temperature might be 30 odd degrees outside. It can be up to 30 degrees hotter than that inside, so the fluid loss for a supercar driver is significant, and Todd has certainly spoken to us about their performance, or the performance enhancement he feels from being better hydrated. You know, they'll have races of 3 to 4 days in a row in hot cars, and the ability to be on their game and make good decisions, and I guess help them through that is paramount for them from a safety point of view. Tim Reed, we've heard of a lot, but then we've got the Oliver's Real Food racing team, which is a UCI racing team. They race through Southeast Asia, and though that team again speak highly of the performance boost that they feel by being better hydrated throughout that. Emily Watts is a great story as well, and very lucky to have her on our side. And Steve Mckenna is an up-and-comer. For anyone that may be following him on Strava at the moment, he's tearing it apart in Adelaide whilst he can't race in the Ironman space. And Caitlin, who has just recently joined us, is a middle distance runner, but has spent 5 years in the US at the University of Florida, has recently come back to Australia. So what we would like to do is build out that ambassador portfolio, as I said before, and really round that out, touching on, I guess, a different kind of sport. So we'd like to look at ambassadors in netball and basketball, tennis, hockey, etc., so that we can really get those team sport aspects happening for the product as well. I guess one of the other things that I would say, and I said this off the top, over 50% of all the people that have expressed an expression of interest at this point in time really make up another brand ambassador for us. They're very happy, very passionate customers that are willing to not only be a customer, but they're very passionate about becoming an investor and joining us on the journey as we take this great product and this very unique product to the world. The other elite sporting teams that are using the product range across there. What we do have, I couldn't fit them all on this slide, but we do have other, I guess, individuals that use the product as well, from UCI cyclists that are currently over in Europe. But when they come here for the Tour Down Under into Adelaide, there are a number of UCI cyclists that come past, say, yep, we love that, we'd love to have it on our team. They'll trial it here and those sorts of things. And I guess the limiting factor for us to be able to get that product to Europe for the European summers and those sorts of things at the moment, of the cycling calendar, has been, I guess, our RTD is relatively heavy to ship. So therefore it is, I guess, the sachet comes into its own in terms of our ability to be able to ship that around the world in a much more easier fashion, and much easier for, I guess, people to have it in their bags and carry around. So there's certainly great scope for us. We're very excited about the position we're in. We've been very pleased with the expressions of interest that have come through thus far. And I guess for today, that's a high level overview of where the business is at and how we look to move forward in the coming months. So Claire, I'll stop sharing my screen, hand back to you.
Awesome. And I'll just make sure that I unpin us and have us in a bit of a gallery view. Beautiful. So I think now's a really great time to take questions from those who are attending the webinar. I've got one off the bat ready to go from the Flying Scotsman. As an athlete and a cycling coach, I use Prept every day. What can we as a community do to help with the development of Prept and provide evidence of improved cognitive response on Prept?
John, that's a great question, and thanks for your expression of interest as well. And you certainly constantly posting about us, and we're very, very much appreciative of that. In terms of, I guess, as a community, it is just constantly talking about our product. And I think the team and I talk about it here in terms of a utopia raise. And the reason we chose to go down the path of a crowdsourced funding raise was for this exact reason. It's to have passionate customers investing and becoming effectively a brand ambassador for us and for yourself as an investor, and sharing the ability that what Prep does and how it does it and how you improve your performance. And I mean, Tim Reed and Amber talk highly about that in their training loads, heavy training loads. Amber doing 20 odd hours of training at the time and struggling to back up after each session. But then once she started to use Prep, that happened. And Tim talking about exactly the same thing, but testing it consistently until there was no doubt that it was actually having a significant effect for him from a hydration point of view. Having spoken to Steve Mckenna here in Adelaide recently, he and Tim have both been talking about over this COVID period where, unfortunately for them, there's a lot of Ironman races that have been cancelled or postponed and pushed back. Their ability to back up training session after training session after training session and build a bigger base of fitness. And so they're looking forward to having a stronger race when they get back to racing has been paramount. So to answer your question, John, it's just continually share the love and share the word about this unique product. And I guess it's an education process for the average person to think, you know, as a cyclist myself, my hydration strategy used to start, 10 or 15 Ks into my bike ride. And we're asking people, if we go back to that 1% of the population, those 35,000 users a week, to consume this product the night before they go to bed, or if it's an afternoon session, to have it with breakfast in the morning. It is a whole new education process and asking people to do something differently. So the more we talk about it, the more it'll get out there.
Can I just pop in here, because I find the question really quite interesting. It uses the word cognitive, and when it comes to performance, performance is obviously both a physical and a mental thing, which is what's implied by cognitive. And therefore, for someone like myself, I find myself wondering how you really go about measuring that. And to be honest with you, measuring in a really scientific way cognitive responses is pretty challenging. So I would sort of summarise my perspective on this, which really reflects exactly what Andrew says, is that what we need to do is we need to have quite a lot of reports from expert athletes, is probably the best way to describe it, who are very in tune with themselves and how they perform and what their anecdotal experience is, because those anecdotes will build up that perception in terms of cognitive and performance responses. So we can try and measure those things in studies, but it's very, very tricky. So the anecdotes will be vital.
For the next question, we have a question from obviously one of the attendees asking, can you see PrEP having a place in the workplace? For example, buildings, mines, factories, or any workplace where it's hot and humid? And will you be looking at targeting this market beyond the other markets that you've spoken about in this presentation?
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, look, it's a very, very interesting question. I mean, this hydration product will work in any environment where you want to hydrate yourself. It's basically as simple as that. And the recovery drink can actually be consumed while you are, working and sweating. You don't have to wait till the end of the day's work. You can actually consume it during the day. So that it may well be applicable to those other environments, but you have to pick your environment that you start with, where we can generate the evidence, the scientific evidence, more readily in the sports field than we can in miners underground, I think is the answer. And that's probably why we started in this sort of area. Yeah.
And just on that as well, as a follow-on question, of course, applying this to emergency services, like fireys are out there battling bushfires, and given any thought to that as well, even beyond the workplace in these sort of situations?
Yeah, Claire, look, certainly there was extraordinary bushfires all around the country at the end of 2019 and the start of this year. And that I guess for us, and to remind people that this whilst we're based on over 20 years of science and medical research that Graham spoke glowingly of prior to this or earlier on in the presentation, PrEP has been on the market since November 2018. So by the time that we got to those fires and bits and pieces in the end of 2019 and the start of this year, we'd been around for just over 12 months, but it's certainly an aspect that we see we can help with, in terms of having, people, if they know they're going to go to a bushfire, it's a part of their kit. It's what they do, and we certainly want to work through that process and be a part of that journey with helping people in those first emergency responders.
Awesome. And I've got two questions here asking about retail trials for convenience stores and a few of financial forecasts. But just before I get to those two questions, I've had another question that's come through about It's a two-part question. Part one, in the testing, what is the feedback on taste, texture, and pain relief? For example, dehydration headaches, which I know that I suffer from, definitely. So I'm looking at prep thinking, oh, we'll get rid of my migraine. And part B to that question is, do you see a market for use as a lifestyle drink? For example, healthy, thick, delicious cure for headaches in summer. And the example of this attendees put in is, most people who drink Red Bull don't need wings at all. So about applying it to more of a lifestyle market as well.
Graham, do you want to
look,
talk to
it's
the
very
science of that?
interesting. We've done a huge amount of work on the taste and feedback and partners with the food industry technology people to really work with this. When we did the initial trial with the crows, we just suspended the resistant starch in the drink, and you could pick that texture up with your mouth. And the crows players were very happy with the product. They felt good about it, and the scientific evidence said it helped the dehydration. But they said it's a little bit. A few of them found it a little bit funny in the mouth. We knew we had to fix that problem, so we spent a lot of time on the taste and feel and getting that right. Lots of market research was done for us. And it came up with a product that people found to be extremely acceptable and pleasant and refreshing. They were the sorts of words that were fed back to us in the qualitative research that we did. I can't comment on the headache, the post-hydration, the dehydration headache type situation. But given that that's directly related to dehydration, if you're correcting dehydration, you should reduce it. But I mean, we haven't measured that in a scientific way.
And Claire, further to that, I guess anecdotally for us, when we were able to go to mass sport participation events, be it Ironman, Melbourne Marathon, those sorts of places, there was significant there would be thousands and thousands of people that would have come past our marquee and have tested our product, and overwhelmingly, yes, it is a different texture. Yes, it is a different feel in the mouth and those sorts of things. It's much more like a fruit smoothie than I guess the fluid of a glass of water or a Powerade or something like that. It is different. So I guess once people understand that's a good thing. But then further to the point, once people have had it and they have that, they sort of have that first sip and they have the second, that is good. That is really good. Finally, a sports drink that tastes good or something like that. So yeah, that's the anecdotal feedback we do get. That first mouthful is certainly different because people are expecting maybe a more fluid, water-like drink, where it isn't. It's more like a fruit smoothie. From the ready-to-drink product, from the powder range, it mixes up. It does. My boys, they have given away Milo, and they now just want to have prepped instead, as they think it tastes better. So it's obviously not as sweet as Milo, but it just mixes up just like that. So
yeah, wonderful. And now to combine two questions into one, are you in any discussions with retail trials for any convenience stores or sales in supplement stores, positioning yourselves alongside the likes of Powerade or Hydrolite? And as a bit of a part B to that question from another attendee, a bit of a guide to that of any financial forecasts that you're happy to explore in this webinar, or whether you're just going to keep that information for the offer document.
Look, we certainly in terms of for part A of that question, our relationship that we've started to build with fitness vending will allow us to start to talk to the likes of the chemist warehouses and these sorts of places. So that's a great thing for us. In terms of supermarkets and being ranged in those places, there's a cost and expense that goes along with that. So at this point in time, we haven't ventured. We've certainly had conversation, but we haven't ventured any further than that at this point in time. Based on a capital raise, we will be able to do that in the forecast moving forward.
Wonderful. And yeah, just to recap on part B of that question, in terms of some of the financials around the business, just for attendees present at the moment, in terms of financial forecasts in a crowdsourced funded round, we've got to be a little bit careful about what we release in these sort of investment offers, and most of the information that you are looking for will be found in the offer document. But Andrew or Graham, if you can give us a bit of a guide to past financial performance for the prepped products, and that can give a bit of an indication into your future projections.
Yeah, look, just I guess in round numbers, Claire, if we think about the last financial year, we jumped from around about $40,000 worth of sales in our first 6 months of 4 or 5 months of FY 2018. FY 19, we've done upwards of just over 128,000 in sales. So we've seen a significant jump, but what I would say to that as well is that the challenge that COVID has brought on from about mid-Feb, when it really started to hit, has been challenging for the business. But that is where we've been able to tap into the distribution points in Singapore. The conversations with Hong Kong and the conversations with Tokyo have all started on the back of the COVID hitting and us not being able to go to events and those sorts of things. So I guess moving forward, what we do see that mass participation events will come back on board. We do see now, whether they're in the same environment that they have been in the past, not quite sure. What we do see is we need the ability to be quite agile in terms of how the business grows. But what we certainly understand is the science that sits within our product doesn't change regardless of what goes on, and it's our ability to get that to the market is the key to that. And I guess one of those key points to that is building out our ability to expand internationally, but also expand domestically as well. And the 3,500 gyms that give us the ability to tap into through fitness vending is a great opportunity for us to do that.
Wonderful. And I know we've spoken a little bit about the application of PrEP in sporting teams, in retail outlets, in emergency services as well. There has been a question about specific health applications, and especially Graham with your own medical background. The attendee is asking if it's based on research of absorptions for things like diarrhea treatment, what about applications in hospitals, etc.? And is that a market that this product would be potentially thinking to expand into in the future, or are you keeping it a bit more of a niche focus at the moment?
Yeah, so this product is really designed for the hydration situation created by sporting losses, sporting dehydration, a workplace. It's already been mentioned, miners and workplace, and that sort of situation where the dehydration is really due to basically perspiration and electrolyte loss. So the formulation that you need in the medical environments is different from this. So it would not be this particular product. That's the first point to make. So the clinical trials were done with a different product. That's why we had to do the clinical trial in the Adelaide's Crow sort of context with the different formulation. We've already been in discussion with oncologists in hospitals about using this to treat people who get diarrhea when they've got chemotherapy. There's a number of groups very interested in that. It's too preliminary to say who they are and where that's going to go. The same with renal units, kidney units in hospitals, where basically just dehydration from everyday life is an issue as well. We have worked with WHO. We've looked at the issues with WHO. That's why the Bill Gates money came to us for the medical formulations. But it's got to be a different type of formulation, and it's a much harder evidence path and a much longer generation time to generate the proof that's needed. So people may not quite realise this, but to get a technology fully implemented in the applicable marketplace in Melbourne as a product, in medicine, is a product that takes between 10 and 20 years, closer to 20 years. So,
wow.
So you need a lot of money. I only have so many years left in my life. But let's put that aside. We're getting there, but it won't be with this particular product. Okay.
Wonderful. I think that is pretty much all the time we have today for questions for Prepped. If you have any more questions for the team, before I hand it over to Andrew and Graham for their final words that they'd like to leave potential investors with, I will be sending out a recording of this webinar to you all via email, and also be including in it Andrew and my contact details if you have further questions and would like to continue the conversation. If you haven't yet expressed interest in Prepped to invest in, I'm just going to pop it in the chat box here. So you can go to www.virtual.com/company/prepped and you can find much more information, see the video again and everything like that. But I might just pass it over to Andrew and Graham to wrap up today's session.
Claire, thanks for hosting. A lot of fun. Hopefully the participants listening, so I think we can see there we've got about 45 online, really enjoyed the conversation. My closing remarks would be, we feel really lucky to have been able to stumble across this great science and be able to bring it into a sports product that allows the everyday athlete to have access to this remarkable product. And for people that want to invest, or people that are thinking about coming on this journey with us, it's been exciting for the last 18 months. We can only see it getting more exciting as we continue to chat with elite football teams, elite sports athletes, and as we build this product around the world. It's certainly going to be a lot of fun. So feel free to jump on board and join the journey.
Yeah, thank you. And look, thanks to everyone for joining and listening in to us talking about this. You can see for me, this has been a very exciting journey, and to work with internationally respected colleagues in the related medical fields to really put this idea together and work through this over several decades has been a very important journey, because what it does is it shows us that the science and the mechanisms, the physiology behind this are very sound, and it provides us with the objective evidence that this really works in a very tough medical situation. And now we've translated it into a pragmatic sports situation and are showing some benefit there. So, and this is a very safe product, and it's compared with the cost of medicines and stuff like that, it's incredibly cheap. So in my view, this just has to work. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again for joining me, and thank you everyone else. Have a wonderful week, and we'll be here if you need us.
Thanks, Claire.
Thanks guys. Bye.